You're listening to the Research Report Show
on Varsity Podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Research Report Show here on Varsity Podcast. I'm Tinashe, and today in the studio we are joined by Samson Mbewe. Say hi, Sam.
Hi, everyone.
Sam is joining us from the University of Cape Town, where he's about to complete his master's degree in energy and development studies. Before we dive into Sam's research, maybe Sam, you can give us a little bit of a background story about who you are, where you're from.
Yeah, so my name is Samson Mbewe. I come from Zambia. Currently, I'm a part-time data analyst at the Human Sciences Research Council. I'm also doing a second master's in energy and development studies as well. My first master's was in economics. I do love karaoke. I love going out. Out for, let me just say, concerts, and just to be on the safe side. Yeah. Going out sounds a bit wrong. But yeah, I pretty much love to meet people. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Sam. And okay, so he's already mentioned that this is his second degree. Good thing you like going out. So walk us through what has your research been in this current master's thesis?
Yes, so my research work focuses on an investigation of the uni-dimensional and multidimensional measures of energy poverty. So I mean, just to begin with, when you look at energy poverty is the deprivation of modern energy services. So what do we mean by this? A deprivation of modern energy services means that a household may be using traditional biomass fuels such as animal dung, firewood, etc. But as we may all know, using such fuels has got effects on the environment and it's got effects on people's health. So, I mean, when you look at the world at large, there's been a transition, from traditional fuels to modernized fuels. I mean, this includes a movement from using charcoal and coal to using electricity and gas and so on and so forth. But the issue is, I mean, for government to enact such a policy, they need to have a good understanding of how many people are living in energy poverty, how many people are deprived of modern energy services. But then when you look at the research part of things, there are different ways of measuring energy poverty. There's a unidimensional way and a multidimensional way. So unidimensional way is sort of a fixed metric where one might, a researcher might argue and say, if somebody spends spends more than a certain proportion of income, it means they are energy poor. A very simple example of a unidimensional measure in South Africa that is used by the Department of Energy is what we call the energy budget share. So what this means is if a household spends then more than 10% of their income on energy services, it means they are energy poor.
Oh, right? I see. Okay.
Yeah, it means they're energy poor. But now this is where my research comes in. The biggest challenge with such a measure, because I mean, you would expect that an energy poor household is a household, perhaps held by a poor household, a relatively poor income household. But then when you look at poor households, I mean, you look at the characteristics of a poor household, they actually don't spend that much on energy because if they're living in the rural areas, they'll often go to the field and collect firewood. And firewood is a non-monetary commodity which may not be accounted for. So in other words, the energy budget share tends to underestimate the amount of people living in energy poverty.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is interesting. That is quite a lot. So you're looking at energy poverty and now looking at how we are measuring it as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. So in what you've been trying to investigate in your thesis, which areas are you looking at, as in which specific countries are you working with, and how you're getting your data for that? So
I'm focusing on South Africa. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to introduce what we call a multidimensional measure of energy poverty. In particular, we're trying to look at the multidimensional energy poverty index by the Oxford Policy Initiative. So what this index does is it does not focus on measuring energy poverty based on, some cutoff point where, if someone spends more than a certain amount of money on energy, means they're energy poor. It focuses on deprivation. Particularly, it combines different sets of deprivation. What do I mean by deprivation? I simply mean within this huge matrix, which is called the multidimensional energy poverty index, we try and understand, does someone have an electricity connection? Does somebody use a modern cook stove, or are they still using traditional fuels? Does someone have a fridge? Does someone have a stove?
Yeah.
Etc. Etc. So what this index helps with is to inform government on carrying out policy initiatives. Do people need more cook stoves? Do people need electricity? Which of these dimensions are people more deprived in? So what we're trying to do in my research is we're trying to make use of the first large-scale household survey run by the National Income Dynamics study under the Southern African Labour and Development Research Unit. Of course, I know I may have said the first large household study. What I simply mean is it's the first panel study. But what does a panel study do? A panel study is a study that tracks individuals from different data collections. Rather, we choose to call them waves. So the first wave, or the first collection of data for the National Income Dynamics study, was done in 2008. So there have been 4 waves so far. So what this study does
every year or every couple of years?
So every after 2 years.
Okay.
So there have been 4 waves, and this study tracks 30,000 people in South Africa, all around South Africa, and tries to look at what is the socioeconomic status in each wave. So essentially, this is how powerful this data set will impact my research, because it will allow us to see what has been the impact of policy throughout its enactment and throughout these waves.
So through that one survey, of course, in the different waves, you've been able to monitor those certain variables you wanted to see that would show energy poverty and how you're measuring it right now.
Yes.
Lovely. So when you were getting interested in this topic, what did you think the outcomes were going to be? And I know you're still rounding up, your research and everything, but what have some of your findings been? Have you kind of confirmed and justified some things you've always suspected about energy poverty in South Africa?
Well, I mean, when you look, my a priori expectation, rather, if I should mention, what I expect to find, or what I believe is a trend, is the fact that the current measure being used by the Department of Energy, which is by focusing on the energy budget share, which states that if a household spends on more than 10% of their income, it means they're energy poor, might to some extent underestimate poverty. And this, to some extent, might affect policy decisions and how energy poor people will be catered for in the economy. So in other words, it's evident we're likely to find that there's an underestimation. And therefore, I expect to find that by using the multidimensional energy poverty index, we might actually understand that there are actually more people living in energy poverty than we initially imagined.
Wow, that is interesting. So it almost sounds also, though, that this study that you're doing is only the beginning into, revealing other areas that still need work in understanding energy poverty. So what is the next step for you? Would you still carry on studying this now when you've gotten your results? And do you see yourself looking into this further to get a deeper understanding on the subject?
Well, I think it's a very, very interesting topic in that, I mean, just going back to poverty itself, poverty is a highly, highly complex topic, and there is no clear-cut definition, of what poverty is. And the same thing applies to energy poverty. There is no clear-cut definition of what energy poverty is.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, I would be more interested to go and explore this area a little bit more, because most of these measures that we've employed in Africa are measures that are created in Europe or perhaps in more advanced countries. But the biggest challenge is, we cannot use one measure that applies in the UK for a country like South Africa that's got different socioeconomic dynamics. So we need to, one way or the other, try and reconstruct these measures. For instance, if we're focusing on the energy budget share, maybe we need to reconstruct this share. Could it be lower?
Yeah.
If that be the case, yeah.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for that, Sam. I'm sure you've given all of us something to think about. I've never actually taken a moment to try to think about such things, about how people are dealing with energy and sources of energy. But enough of that. I'm sure if anybody wants more information, they will contact you directly. But I'd like to take this time now to just find out, so other than, of course, you mentioned you're working and you're also still doing your research, but what do you do outside of that? Like, what's the next steps for you after the master's, and what do you do in your spare time?
Well, that's a very interesting question. The funny thing is that in my spare time, I partly work.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, I partly work. Yeah, I partly work. Currently I'm doing some work on a very, very exciting project because I'm the current 2016 global nominee for the NRAF global project. Yeah, so
Congratulations.
no, thank you. So yeah, I do some work for the Human Sciences Research Council, where I'm trying to focus on the growth pattern of informal settlements in Joburg, which is a very, very interesting topic. But aside from that, well, like I've mentioned, I'm pretty much an easygoing person. I love to go for concerts. I love TED Talks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love to go to concerts. I love TED Talks. I really love meeting people and getting to explore how people think. And yeah.
And now two masters down. When is the PhD coming?
Well, the PhD initially I planned for 2017, but I think I should take sabbatical, if I should call it that. Yeah, hopefully I plan to pursue a PhD in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for taking time out to talk to us today. And I'm sure as you finish your work, we would love to have you back on the show so that you can give our listeners a bit of an idea of the actual end product of what you've been working on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Research Report Show. I've been Tinashe and talk to you soon. Bye.
This is Varsity Podcasts.